Much indeed for joining us. So the criticism here for Joe Biden is that he is protecting one area of the Arctic to potentially destroy another. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, look, I mean, these are the types of trade-offs that President Biden is simply going to have to make as we move through this energy transition. I mean, this is a president that campaigned saying that he was going to try to curb oil drilling. His base is very much that's trying to address climate change and in favor of the U.S. doing more. But let's be honest, as oil prices rose and inflation fueled inflation, it became a really big campaign issue for Biden and the Democrats to look like they were doing something. So, he needs to balance this need to produce the domestic resources that the U.S. has with these climate commitments. And so what you saw was in essence a compromise, basically approving a smaller plan than what ConocoPhillips had initially put forward, but approving oil drilling nonetheless.
And does this then contradict in a big way his commitments to becoming CO2 net zero by 2050? Clearly, Joe Biden has made some commitment to climate action, but this project is the equivalent of adding some 2 million cars to the roads in the United States.
Well, look, I mean, certainly this project adds to the amount of oil that the U.S. is going to be producing, but let's be very honest, it doesn't add to the amount of oil that the U.S. is going to be using. And that's where the large amount of those emissions are going to be coming from. I mean, until the U.S., until particularly developed countries do more to address the demand side of that issue, allowing more upstream development really isn't necessarily adding to the climate problem in the same way as adding additional demand will. I mean, honestly, the developed world needs to begin addressing demand rather than necessarily just simply focusing on supply.
And what's the reaction been like from people who live in this area of Alaska? Presumably fairly mixed opinions, because there is an environmental aspect, but clearly the economic benefits could well outweigh those for the people who live there.
Sure. And I mean, I haven't spoken to people in Alaska since the approval, but this has been a controversial project with those in Alaska saying, look, there are other things that we need to do to develop economically. We can't just be dependent upon the oil industry. We do live in an incredibly beautiful and unique and delicate place. But this is also a state that still does rely heavily on the oil industry, and they've seen production decline, quite a bit, precipitously, I would say, since its kind of heydays back when the North Slope was discovered. And so, the state does rely on the revenues, and people do rely on the jobs. So it is, much like the transition debate globally, there really are trade-offs that need to be made on both sides.
So a balancing act for Biden. Well, we thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Noah Brenner there, Executive Editor of Operations with Energy Intelligence. Appreciate that.
Thank you.